So my presentation is on Huntington's disease, also known as HD. So what is Huntington's disease? Huntington's disease is an extremely rare and is an inherited disease that is caused from the breakdown of nerve cells in the brain. In 1872, a man named George Huntington gave the lecture and description of this disease, which is why it's called Huntington's disease. It affects many parts of the human body, including functional movement, cognitive, and psychiatric disorders. This disease is where there's more than a usual CAG repeats, which are cytosine, adenine, and guanine that are present, and this was found in 1993. So onto the functional movement part of this disease. This is the main part that it affects. Many of the things that you'll experience if you have this is jerking, squirming, and twisting like movements, muscle contraction, eye movement that is delayed or random, trouble speaking and swallowing, and the main thing that you'll see is balance and gait are impaired. These problems associated with Huntington's disease affect a person to complete everyday life activities and just make it hard to become independent and work on your own. Now on to cognitive disorders. This is the thinking part of Huntington's disease. So one will experience be easily distracted. They're unable to perform a task, especially when there's one single task that's hard to do it without stopping. Another thing is acting without thinking, and in turn this creates bad decision making, overall slowness and thinking through words and thoughts. The last one is difficulty with new information. Now on to psychiatric disorders. The main psychiatric disorder is depression. There are other ones that I'll talk about later, but some of the things that you'll experience with this are depression-like symptoms such as apathy, sadness, insomnia, no energy, fatigue, suicidal thoughts, and just distance from society. And those disorders that I was talking about other than depression could be bipolar disorder, mania, obsessive compulsive disorder are the three other ones. So who's at risk? How common is it? It's an inherited disease. One gene is affected. This is an extremely rare disorder. Only 1 out of every 10,000 and 20,000 people are affected. The mean age is from 30 to 50 years old. There can be symptoms before the age of 20, but this will be called juvenile Huntington's disease, also known as JHD. The average duration of death is 17 to 20 years, and the main cause of death is mainly from pneumonia, but then the second place is from suicide. Back to JHD, juvenile Huntington's disease. These are when you find the signs or symptoms before the age of 20, and this typically is found when you're having trouble focusing or doing well in school, having epileptic fits, and in JHD, the father is 75% the affected parent. In JHD, the CAG repeat length is typically over 55 when someone has this. That is extremely high. So next, I have a picture of a brain with Huntington's disease, and on the right is a normal looking brain. You can see how deteriorated the brain with HD is. Next, I have a short video, about a minute long, about a person living through the struggles with HD.
Well, it affected me in my working. I'm not working anymore. I'm on disability, and it's because I can't read as much like I used to read.
What kind of work did you used to do?
I was a legal secretary.
And how did it interfere with reading and doing your job?
It interfered with my reading pleadings and emails. I can't comprehend reading anymore, and I've been reading my whole life. I don't read books like I used to. In fact, I don't read them at all. And it has affected me in ways of eating. I drop my food. I fall over. I fall on occasion.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about how exercise with Huntington's disease, the benefits of it. there's two aspects of this. There's a fitness aspect and a social aspect. The fitness benefit, it improves the individual ability to perform everyday tasks which they struggle with. It improves the areas in which the patient struggles the most, so you can sort of target those spots. And balance and gait are the two major components, so those you typically show progression in. The social benefit, the patient usually feels more self-confident and self-improvement. They typically have better relationship with family and friends, and just overall just more socially available. Now we'll talk about the barriers. So there's a cognitive impairment where the thinking part of this, where you not be able to focus, thinking about exercises one at a time. Then there's a physical impairment where obviously there's a lack of balance, the muscle contraction, and then the random jerking, twisting, and squirming movements. And then there's also the lack of motivation. Okay, so how should exercise look for a person with HD? There should be an emphasis on flexibility and warm-up. They should be taken seriously to avoid injury. Many balance and coordination exercises, which is what they struggle with. Should have some resistance training to strengthen these muscles. And when it comes to aerobic training, there doesn't have to be a lot of emphasis on it, but there should be a little bit. It's just typically what they don't need to be, what they don't need as much. But the next is cool down. There should be a cool down at the end of the program. All right, so for case study now. So the patient is a 38-year-old male who's diagnosed with the early stages of Huntington's disease. The patient's doctor told him that physiotherapy and the use of exercise would be a benefit to him to combat his problems that he's facing. The patient works in an office and has to do a lot of writing. He finds himself losing focus all the time, and he has trouble writing things down and typing on the computer. The patient complains about his ability to get fatigued quickly. He loves to play with his kids, but finds it hard nowadays. He's been falling down lately, mostly due to his recent struggles with not being able to perform everyday tasks like he used to. Feeling down. But also due to the recent news of having Huntington's disease. He wants to improve his balance and gait since those are the biggest problems that he has at the time. So the response to the case study. First, I would like to make sure that the patient is medically cleared by the doctor to start the exercise program. I will go through a series of questions that need to be asked, such as, are they taking any medication? What are the types of goals they want to be reached? What are the things that he has problems with in his everyday life? And if there's any other medical history concern that needs to be brought to my attention. With this being said, and all the questions being answered to the degree of which we can start a prescription, there would need to be a cautious and thought-out exercise program implemented. The risks that we could see are fatigue, sudden random movements, and falling, which are all dangers for their health and the people around them. So appropriate measures must be taken to keep the patient and people around them safe. So now on to exercise testing. The first test I would do is a Romberg test. This will allow me to see where the patient is regarding balance and related to the proprioception. 30-second chair stand test. This will not only let me see how much strength they have in their legs, but also give me an idea of how much fatigue and endurance, where they're at with that. Lastly, just the standard sit and reach test to measure how much flexibility the patient has. Okay. So now on the exercise prescription. For the aerobic aspect, we would do 2 days a week, non-consecutive days, for intensity-wise aerobic, 10 to 11 RP on the Borg scale, which is considered fairly light. Time-wise, we would do 30 to 45 minutes a week, which is about 20 minutes each day. The type, we would like to do a continuous biking treadmill kind of thing, so they don't, because they easily are distracted and think randomly sometimes. For resistance frequency, we would do 3 days a week. It's a little more than aerobic in each aspect. Intensity-wise, a little more than aerobic, 13 to 14 RP on the Borg scale, which is considered somewhat hard. Time-wise, we would do 8 exercises, 8 to 10 reps, 3 to 4 sets. And as time goes on and they show progression, we would add different sets and reps and exercises. Our type, we do body weight and machines. I would stay away from heavy free weights because that can create danger for the people around them and themselves. Flexibility and balance is the main one that we have to focus on. This would be 5 to 6 days a week for the frequency. For intensity-wise, just to the point of slight tension. Time, 20 to 30 seconds per stretch or balance. And then the type, we would do stretching, balancing. Types of that would be like 1 foot, eyes closed, etc. And then, so modifications and special recommendations. So at all times, there should be a spotter or some sort of harness to make sure the patient does not fall. Like I said earlier, there should be no heavy free weights because of the sudden jerks, twists, and squirms. These can cause serious injury to the patient and the people that are surrounding them. The main focus should be on gait and balance because those are typically the main concern for people that have HD. Like I said earlier, a proper warm-up and cool-down are very important to avoid injury. Next one is must pay attention to client at all time because they lose focus easily and it could be a danger. And lastly, just be encouraging because people with HD struggle with mental health and self-esteem, self-confidence, so always be encouraging. And my last slide is just the references.